This was a unique pattern style for me, and I love the flowy options. This is McCall 7786, and I'm sewing view C in this video. Instead of having the side seams open, I decided to sew the entire seam closed from top to bottom. The sizing for this pattern includes a lot of ease, so I made the size 8 instead of the usual size 10, and I probably could have gone down further to size 6. The elastic in the back waistband gives some flexibility in the sizing as well. The floral fabric I'm using is a cotton sateen from Thready Made. I've linked the pattern and fabric in the description below, as well as a link to the threading tool I use in the video for the waistband casing. Join me in sewing this flowy pair of comfortable pants. Let's get started. Here is the right side of my front piece, and I'm going to attach the pocket. Placing the pocket right sides together with the slanted edge of the front piece, and pinning in place. And I'll repeat for both front pieces with both pockets. Then I'll sew these slanted seams with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Then we're going to understitch both of those pockets, opening the pocket out over its seam allowance and giving that seam a press. Then we're going to sew the pocket to its seam allowance underneath, from the top to the bottom of that slanted edge with about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do this for both pockets. Once that's understitched, turn the pocket to the inside and give that seam a press. Place the side front pocket right sides together with the attached pocket, pin together along the outside edges. Doing this for both pocket sets. Now we're going to sew the 2 layers of pocket together for each set, from the top inner edge to the side edge, making sure to sew through these 2 layers only and not through the front of the pant. Once you've sewn with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, finish those raw edges for both sets. Now with those pocket edges finished on the inside, pin the pocket in place to the top and side of the pant. Baste the pocket to the top and the side and repeat for both pocket sets. Here is the top slanted edge of my lower front pant piece. I'm going to sew basting stitches within the seam allowance from one side of the slant to the other, doing this for both lower front pieces. Place the corresponding front pant piece right sides together with this lower front piece and pin together at the sides. Pull the lower front basting stitches so that the lower front piece matches the upper front piece. Distribute the gathers evenly and pin in place. Sew the slanted edge with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, finish the raw edges, and repeat for the opposite front pant piece. And then press those seam allowances upward. Repeat to gather the top edges of both of your lower back pieces, placing the gathered slanted edge right sides together with its corresponding back pant piece and pinning in place. Then sew this slanted seam with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, finish the raw edges, and press the seam upward just as we did for the front pant pieces, repeating for both back sets. Place a corresponding front and back pant piece right sides together along the inner leg seam and pin the inner leg seam. Then we'll sew this inner leg seam from the bottom of the crotch curve to the bottom of the pants with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and finish the raw edges. Repeat for both front and back pant sets. Here is one set of front and back pieces opened out away from each other at the seam that we just sewed. I'm going to place the second set of front and back pieces right sides together with this one and pin them together at the crotch curve. Then we can sew the crotch curve with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and finish those raw edges. Here is the top of my front pant piece. I'll place my uninterfaced waistband piece right sides together with the top edge of the pant, matching the centers and the side edges, and pin in place. Sew the waistband to the top of the pant with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Trim that seam by about half. And then press that waistband seam allowance up toward the waistband. Here is the top of my back pant piece with the wrong side of the fabric facing me. And I've gone ahead and pressed the top edge of the fabric to the wrong side twice. First, folding it to the wrong side along the fold line transferred from the pattern piece, which should be 1.5 inches. Then I also pressed the topmost raw edge to the wrong side by 1/4 inch all the way across. I'll fold along the main fold line, and with that 1/4 inch portion tucked under, I'll pin in place along that folded edge. Now I'll edge stitch along that inner folded edge straight across. I cut a piece of 1 inch wide elastic using my cutting guide pattern piece, and now I'll lace it through the casing. Now, with both edges of my elastic secured on the inside and flush with the raw edges, I'll baste both edges in place. I've placed my front and back pant pieces right sides together, and we're going to pin the side seams. As you pin, note that the front waistband will extend 5/8 of an inch beyond the top of the elasticated back waistband, and pin in place. And repeat to pin both side seams. Then we can sew both of our side seams from the top of the back waistband straight down to the very bottom of the pant with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then finish both of the raw edges. Apply interfacing to the wrong side of your remaining waistband piece. Take it to your ironing board and fold that bottom curved edge to the wrong side by 5/8 of an inch all the way across. Once you've established that memory crease, you can trim this seam allowance by about half. Now I'll place the top raw edge of the interfaced waistband right sides together with our main waistband piece, and pin from one short raw edge to the other. Then we'll stitch those 2 layers of waistband together from one side to the other with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And then we can trim the seam allowance that we just sewed by about half. Turn the interfaced waistband to the inside, making sure that the side seams on both sides are pressed toward the waistband, and give the top edge of the waistband a good press. Place the pre-pressed folded edge of the inner waistband right on top of the main waistband stitching line, and pin in place all the way across, pinning from the outside. And at each of the exposed side seams, fold back that side seam allowance of the interfaced waistband so that it covers the seam allowance and just covers the stitching line, and pin in place on both sides. sewing from the front of the garment, I'm going to stitch in the ditch of both of the side seams, as well as stitching in the ditch of that main waistline seam. And then for the very top of the front waistband, I'm going to edge stitch along the top edge. Here is the wrong side of the fabric for the bottom edge of one of my pant legs. And I'm ready to press up the hem. I've tried on the pants at this point to determine how much of a hem I want. And I've decided to press this bottom edge to the wrong side twice, by 1/2 inch, and then once again by another 1/2 inch, doing this all the way around for both pant legs. And now with those folded edges in place, I'm going to edge stitch close to the innermost fold all the way around both pant legs. And now the pants are complete. Here's the final resultant fit of my fun new culotte pants. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future sew-alongs, and I'll see you in the next video.